scheming woman framed pregnant wife, millionaire misunderstood and lost. Her now he lives in regret. Richard Carnegie was a man blessed with wealth, a sprawling empire that stretched from the heart of New York City to the sun-kissed coasts of California. For years, he lived as if nothing could rattle his perfectly balanced world. But behind the gleaming facade of boardroom triumphs and glittering galas lay a secret heartbreak. His beloved wife, Elise, once the sunshine in his life, was gone, driven away by a wicked conspiracy that left her branded as a liar and an opportunist. Now, alone in his opulent mansion, Richard drowns in regret. How did a scheming woman manage to destroy the only love he had ever known? Richard Carnegie grew up in a modest apartment in Queens, New York. His father, Paul Carnegie, had once been an investment banker but lost nearly everything in the economic crash of the late 1980s. Despite their financial setbacks, Paul instilled in his son an unyielding drive to succeed. Night after night, Paul would remind Richard, hard work, discipline, and respect for others are the keys to greatness. Richard internalized those lessons deeply. By age 30, he had climbed the corporate ladder at Winston Baines, a prestigious private equity firm in Manhattan. Few could match his knack for spotting undervalued companies and orchestrating lucrative buyouts. He soon founded his own investment outfit, Carnegie Holdings, drawing top-tier clients and making him a millionaire several times over. During a routine meeting with potential donors for a charity event, Richard met Elise Beaumont. She was a finance graduate from the London School of Economics, but had chosen a more humanitarian path, coordinating philanthropic partnerships. Elise was tall, with a delicate grace and warm hazel eyes that twinkled whenever she spoke about helping the less fortunate. It was impossible not to be captivated by her gentle spirit. Richard fell for her kindness and altruism in a world often ruled by cutthroat ambitions. Elise, in turn, found in Richard a man whose confidence lit up every room, yet still carried traces of that humble boy from Queens. Their courtship was a whirlwind, museum dates, walks through Central Park, and quiet nights spent discussing future projects that might change the world. After just a year, Richard proposed to her beneath a canopy of cherry blossoms near the Bethesda fountain, hiring a string quartet to serenade them. They married in a stunning ceremony held at the Pierre Hotel overlooking Central Park. The press clamored for photos of the dazzling young couple, the philanthropic beauty and the rising finance mogul. Newspapers hailed them as the new power duo. For a while, life was bliss. Elise used Richard's resources to expand her philanthropic ventures, establishing scholarships for underprivileged students and funding healthcare clinics in impoverished areas. Richard soared to even greater financial heights, buoyed by Elise's unwavering moral compass and emotional support. They were unstoppable, true partners in every sense. But every soaring story invites envy. Unbeknownst to them, danger lurked closer than they imagined. A cunning woman nestled herself into their inner circle, determined to take down Elise and seize the millionaire's heart and fortune for herself. Cassandra Wilkinson first crossed paths with Richard at a posh networking event in Midtown Manhattan. She was introduced by a mutual acquaintance, Daniel O'Malley, who worked as a public relations consultant. Cassandra had just joined Winston Baines in a client liaison role, though no one seemed entirely sure what her day-to-day responsibilities involved. With her impeccable style, designer heels, glossy raven hair cascading over her shoulders, and an air of polished confidence, Cassandra had no trouble attracting attention, especially from powerful men. Richard, ever polite, shook her hand and asked about her background. Cassandra offered a beguiling smile. She claimed she was a Harvard Business School graduate and had interned at the World Bank. Her polished diction and precise references to economic theory gave her story some credibility. Yet Elise noticed something off in Cassandra's bright green eyes, an intensity that felt more like calculation than genuine warmth. In subsequent weeks, Cassandra positioned herself strategically, Whenever Richard and Elise attended business functions, she'd ask Richard for investment advice, flatter him with statements about his legendary deal-making skills. Elise tried to remain gracious. She didn't believe in petty jealousy, but she couldn't dismiss the sense that Cassandra's interest ran deeper than professional admiration. Meanwhile, a soft rumor began circulating that Cassandra was vying for an executive position at Winston Baines. She'd bragged to co-workers about her connections in high places. Some found her arrogant, but none could deny that she was effective at charming people. Richard chalked it up to her ambition. After all, he respected the hustle. Elise, however, wondered if Cassandra's ostentation might be masking something else. As Cassandra's presence grew more frequent in their social circle, she began to forge a surprising friendship with Elise, or at least that's how it appeared on the surface. She'd compliment Elise's philanthropic work and show up at charity events to lend a hand. Elise, ever compassionate, tried to see the best in Cassandra, even inviting her to join an advisory committee for a new arts initiative benefiting underprivileged youth. But in private, Cassandra harbored darker intentions. She watched Elise's every move, studying how the woman interacted with donors, with underlings, and most importantly, with Richard. The more she learned about Elise's gentle nature, the more she smirked inwardly. Such kindness, Cassandra believed, was a weakness she could manipulate. She set her sights on systematically discrediting Elise, convinced that if she destroyed the wife's reputation, the husband would be hers for the taking. The trap was set. All Cassandra needed was an opportunity and the perfect lie. The chance to strike came faster than even Cassandra anticipated. One morning, Elise was in the final stages of preparing for a high-profile fundraiser, the Spark of Hope Gala, aimed at raising money for after-school programs across New York's most struggling neighborhoods. Richard, scheduled to be a keynote speaker, had planned to highlight Elise's leadership and philanthropic impact during his speech. As final details were falling into place, a mild panic rippled through the event committee. A set of important financial documents for the evening's auction had gone missing. These documents included item valuations, donor commitments, and tax forms. It wasn't just an inconvenience. Losing them could jeopardize the entire gala and embarrass both Elise and Richard in front of high-net-worth contributors. When Elise asked around, one volunteer recalled seeing Cassandra near the stack of files shortly before they disappeared. Elise's heart sank. Cassandra had indeed offered to help that day, but Elise couldn't imagine Cassandra sabotaging the event. Why would she? Still, the suspicion lingered. In a seemingly unrelated turn of events, Richard received an anonymous tip, a single text message on his private phone that read, "Check Elise's accounts. She's funneling donor money for personal use." Stunned, he ignored the message at first. He trusted Elise implicitly, yet the paranoid part of his mind itched. With millions in philanthropic funds under management, was it possible that Elise had orchestrated some shady accounting? When he brought the matter up hesitantly with Elise, she was devastated. "How can you even think I'd do such a thing?" she said, her voice shaking. "Everything is transparent. We have third-party audits." Richard apologized profusely, saying it was just a strange rumor he needed to address. Elise tried to understand the pressure Richard was under, especially with unscrupulous people always looking to plant seeds of scandal. She assured him that her finances were an open book. She even volunteered to bring in additional auditors. He agreed that might be a good step to protect their reputations. All the same, an uncomfortable shadow hung over both of them. With uncanny timing, Cassandra made her move. When she casually popped by Richard's office at Carnegie Holdings, she feigned concern about Elise's management of donor funds. She claimed she had overheard Elise speaking in hushed tones with a board member about unaccounted money. Cassandra acted reluctant to share details, but said she felt morally obligated to let Richard know in case Elise was being manipulated or threatened. Richard felt the walls closing in. Though he still believed in Elise, the swirl of missing documents, anonymous messages, and Cassandra's allegations began eroding his trust. And Cassandra, smiling inwardly, sensed her plan was unfolding exactly as she had hoped. The Spark of Hope Gala arrived on a crisp October evening at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Dozens of wealthy patrons, celebrities, and community leaders streamed into the grand entrance, greeted by the soft glow of chandeliers and the echo of live jazz. Elise, dressed in an elegant lavender gown, circulated among the guests, her smile genuine as she thanked them for their attendance and donations. In the background, Richard kept a vigilant eye on everything, from the VIP seating arrangements to the hush-hush conversation swirling among certain donors. Rumors had been spreading. Some whispered about missing funds that might cast a shadow over Elise's philanthropic endeavors. Elise tried to dismiss them as idle gossip, but tension radiated from Richard. She noticed how he avoided meeting her eyes for too long, as though wrestling with some internal conflict. She longed to reassure him that everything was fine, though even she began to sense that the night might not go as planned. Just before Richard was scheduled to make his keynote speech, Cassandra materialized at his side. She wore a daring red dress that turned heads, but her expression was all business. Lowering her voice, she murmured, "Richard, I have to tell you something, but promise you won't shoot the messenger. I overheard staffers complaining about Elise's emergency fund from the donations. They said something about thousands of dollars unaccounted for. I'm sorry if this is the wrong time, but it sounds serious." Richard's jaw tightened, panic flashing in his eyes. "We're in the middle of the gala, Cassandra. I can't deal with rumors like that right now." She touched his arm gently. "I know you want to focus on your speech, but maybe it's better to confront it head-on before donors get spooked. Sometimes it's easier to clear the air with transparency." A few minutes later, as he stepped on stage to speak, Richard's anxiety gnawed at him. He delivered a lukewarm introduction, praising Elise's dedication, but he lacked his usual warmth. Elise watched from the sidelines, her heart pounding with both pride and concern. Then, as if on cue, a hush spread through the crowd. A group of donors near the front began whispering and checking their phones. One of them, a certain Lydia Harrington, known for her sharp tongue, stood up and confronted Elise in front of everyone. "Mrs. Carnegie," Lydia hissed, voice carrying across the silent room, "can you explain these allegations about mishandled donor funds? People are saying thousands are missing from last quarter's accounts. I won't donate a dime until you clarify." Elise's face went pale. She stammered a response about audits and the importance of verifying facts, but the damage was done. The crowd buzzed with tension. Richard looked at Elise with uncertain eyes. Cassandra, standing off to the side, smirked behind her champagne flute. The night, meant to uplift countless children, was turning into a PR nightmare for Elise. And the seeds of doubt carefully planted by Cassandra now threatened to bloom into a full-blown scandal. In the immediate aftermath of the gala fiasco, Elise retreated to her office at the non-profit headquarters. For days, she sifted through financial statements, donor lists, and bank records, determined to prove her innocence. The tension was palpable. Staff members whispered in the hallways about possible embezzlement, though most believed Elise's integrity was above reproach. Still, the rumor mill churned. Donors withdrew pledges, or at least delayed them, awaiting clarity. Richard, for his part, struggled between loyalty to his wife and protecting Carnegie Holdings' spotless reputation. He hired forensic accountants to dissect the nonprofit's finances. Elise didn't object. She wanted the truth to prevail. Yet each day that passed without exonerating evidence seemed to drive a wedge deeper between them. Meanwhile, Cassandra capitalized on the chaos. She dropped hints at business gatherings that she felt bad for Richard. She claimed to see him as a victim of Elise's reckless financial management. Her carefully chosen words, always disguised as concern, left enough ambiguity for people to draw their own scandalous conclusions. The board of Winston Baines even invited Cassandra to head a new philanthropic liaison department, citing her keen insight into the philanthropic realm. She graciously accepted, attributing her success to her close observation of the Carnegie fiasco. Late one evening, Elise found a USB drive on her desk, labeled "Urgent for your eyes only." Plugging it into her computer, she discovered scans of forged invoices and suspicious wire transfer receipts, all bearing her electronic signature. Shocked, she realized someone had meticulously fabricated evidence linking her to the missing funds. She felt cold dread wash over her. This was no misunderstanding. Someone was framing her. Desperate, she rushed to find Richard at his office in Midtown. She showed him the USB drive's contents, voice trembling as she insisted these documents were doctored. He studied the files with a grim expression. "Elise, these look too real. We have your digital signature, your login credentials. The auditors will say you're at fault." Tears blurred her vision. "You can't possibly believe I did this. Richard, I swear on our marriage, on everything we've built, that I'm innocent." He closed his eyes, pain etched into his features. I want to believe you, but how can I ignore all this evidence? And the rumors, the missing money. It's all pointing to you. If it's a setup, who would do this to you? Elise gripped his hands. "I don't know. We have to figure it out. Please, help me." But the lines in Richard's face hardened. "We're hemorrhaging trust. My board, your donors, they're all demanding answers. If you can't produce definitive proof soon, I'll have no choice but to step back from you publicly." Elise felt her world tilt. Her husband, the one man she believed would stand by her, was preparing to cut her loose. And somewhere in a corner office, Cassandra Wilkinson likely watched, smiling as she orchestrated Elise's downfall to perfection. Richard's words hung in the air like a looming storm. Over the following week, tension escalated at a breakneck pace. Journalists hounded Elise whenever she stepped outside, microphones thrust into her face with questions about the embezzlement scandal. Social media erupted in speculation, some calling her a philanthropic fraud, others rallying to her defense. The not-for-profits board convened emergency sessions to decide whether to suspend Elise pending further investigation. For Elise, each day felt like walking a tightrope. She was innocent. But how to prove it when the digital evidence looked damning and her every move was scrutinized? Attempting to salvage the situation, she submitted to an extensive interview with a reputable investigative firm. They uncovered anomalies, like how the times on certain documents didn't match her schedule, but it wasn't enough to exonerate her completely. Her login credentials could have been compromised, but the question remained: by whom? Richard found himself cornered on every side. Carnegie Holdings stock wavered under the negative press. High-stakes clients began to question his judgment. Richard had always thrived on controlling every variable, but now his personal and professional worlds were in chaos. Late one night, after an emergency board meeting, he returned to their penthouse apartment and delivered an ultimatum to Elise. "We have to separate, at least temporarily," he said, voice tinged with regret. "The board is insisting I publicly distance myself from you until the investigation concludes. If I don't, I risk the entire firm's stability." Elise stared at him, disbelief warring with heartbreak. "Richard, you can't do this. Our marriage isn't a mere business arrangement you can discard to appease shareholders." He bristled. "It's not about discarding you. It's about protecting everything we've built. Everything I've built." His eyes flickered with guilt as the words came out. Tears slipped down Elise's cheeks. "We built it together," she whispered. "Now you're choosing your empire over your wife." Richard pressed his lips together, clearly tormented. "I need you to understand. If we don't contain the fallout, we'll lose everything, even the resources that fund your charities. Once you're cleared, we can reconcile, but right now I don't see another way." She looked at him for a long moment, seeing the man she once knew, now a shadow of himself, consumed by fear of scandal. Nodding in silent agony, she packed a small suitcase and walked out the door. Neither said goodbye. As Elise waited for an elevator in the hallway, she glanced back through teary eyes, half expecting Richard to stop her. He never did. Downstairs, she hailed a taxi into the cold night, feeling utterly alone. High above her, Richard stood by the window, watching her fade into the city lights, his heart a knot of regret. He wanted to chase after her, but the weight of his empire's demands held him frozen in place. And at that moment, Cassandra's plan neared its cruel completion. Elise moved into a modest studio apartment in Chelsea, away from the prying eyes of the media and high society. The once lavish lifestyle, chauffeured rides, a penthouse with sweeping views, was replaced by silent afternoons spent sifting through reams of evidence. She had her laptop, a stack of suspicious documents, and a growing determination to unearth the truth. If nobody else would stand by her, she would clear her name alone. She found an unlikely ally in Catherine O'Neill, a former journalist turned freelance investigator. Catherine, a friend of Elise's from earlier philanthropic projects, had always admired her sincerity. Outraged by the smear campaign, Catherine offered her research skills pro bono. Together, they traced digital footprints and scoured metadata from the forged invoices. Catherine discovered that certain IP addresses led to suspicious rerouting points, hinting at someone systematically logging into the non-profit system using Elise's credentials at odd hours. Times Elise was verifiably elsewhere. Meanwhile, Richard, beset by the demands of Carnegie Holdings, tried to bury his guilt in 16-hour workdays. Cassandra, now a regular advisor to the firm, grew closer to him professionally. She offered to help manage the philanthropic fallout, often staying late in Richard's office under the guise of damage control. She poured honeyed words into his ear. How strong he was being, how the scandal wasn't his fault, how maybe he deserved a partner who truly understood the demands of wealth and prestige. Every time Richard heard Cassandra's insinuations about Elise, a pang of regret shot through him. He yearned to believe in Elise's innocence, but the mounting scandal left him feeling trapped. Why hadn't Elise found clear evidence to exonerate herself yet? Why was everything taking so long? And as much as he wanted to call or text her, he refrained, fearful that any association might amplify the controversy. In her cramped apartment, Elise pressed on. Late one evening, Catherine burst in with a crucial breakthrough. She had located a digital watermark embedded in the forged invoices, an editing signature that matched software registered to a certain Winston Baines corporate license. Cross-referencing logs, they discovered that one user at Winston Baines had been particularly active at times corresponding to the forgeries. That user's ID was a name Elise recognized all too well: Cassandra Wilkinson. Elise felt a mix of outrage and relief. Finally, she had a direct link implicating Cassandra. But would it be enough? Cassandra was adept at covering her tracks, and Elise's credibility still hung by a thread. Steeling herself, Elise decided there was only one course of action left: confront Cassandra head-on, expose her scheme, and force the truth into the public eye. For this, she might need more than digital breadcrumbs. She needed an undeniable confession or a decisive piece of evidence. And if no one else at the top would help her, she would do it alone, even if it meant risking everything she had left. Elise and Catherine devised a plan. They would lure Cassandra into a situation where she might incriminate herself. To do that, Elise pretended to be on the verge of giving up. She made a few carefully placed calls to former associates, lamenting her plight, and let slip that she was considering leaving the country to avoid further scandal. The rumor eventually reached Cassandra through the grapevine. Sure enough, within days, Cassandra privately reached out to Elise. Under the guise of concern, she sent Elise an email. "I know things have been rough. Perhaps we could meet and find some resolution." Elise, feigning desperation, replied that she was willing to talk anywhere, anytime. They scheduled a meeting at a small cafe in the Lower East Side. a far cry from the glamorous midtown offices. Catherine arranged for discreet surveillance equipment to be placed at a corner table. The cafe's owner, a friend of Catherine's, agreed to keep quiet. Elise arrived early, wearing simple jeans and a sweater, her face drawn but resolute. She clutched a notebook and a small digital recorder in her handbag. Cassandra showed up moments later in a designer coat, her eyes flickering with triumph as she surveyed Elise's worn appearance. Sipping their coffees, Cassandra led with practiced sympathy. "I can't imagine the ordeal you've been through. It must be so stressful. I wanted to see if there's a way we can settle this quietly, without more damage to your reputation." Elise locked eyes with her. "That depends on what you want, Cassandra. The allegations against me. Someone set me up. My entire life is in ruins." She paused, letting her voice tremble. "Do you know anything about that?" Cassandra gave a theatrical sigh. "Elise, you're naive if you think everyone in the business world is honest. People take advantage of kind souls. I'd hate to see you dragged through more mud." Elise's heart pounded. She decided to push. "If I could pay to clear my name, would that help? Money might make these false accusations disappear, right?" At that, Cassandra's eyes gleamed. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Look, I'm not asking for a bribe, just a little compensation for, let's say, persuading certain individuals to come forward with exonerating evidence. These donors are under obligations, you understand. But if you made it worth their while, I'm sure testimonies could be adjusted." Elise's stomach churned at Cassandra's brazen corruption. Keeping her composure, she asked, "How much?" Cassandra tossed out a figure that made Elise's jaw clench. Enough to buy a luxury apartment in Manhattan. Elise pretended to mull it over, then nodded. "I can arrange that, but I need assurance you can fix this. I need the real story to come out. No more forging documents." She stared pointedly at Cassandra, hoping the words would draw an admission. Cassandra smirked. "I understand forging documents is a felony, but if everything is pinned on a clueless scapegoat, you don't have to worry. Sometimes evidence just vanishes." Elise's hand shook around her cup. Cassandra had all but admitted her guilt. The hidden recorder whirred quietly, capturing every damning word. Elise wondered if Richard would believe it once he heard Cassandra's cold confession. Leaving the cafe, Elise felt a surge of grim satisfaction. The plan had worked. Cassandra had incriminated herself. However, Elise knew that a secretly recorded conversation might or might not hold legal weight. She needed more tangible proof. Fortunately, Catherine had her own methods. While Elise baited Cassandra at the cafe, Catherine discreetly followed a lead on Winston Baines's server logs, discovering exactly which computer had been used to forge documents. The logs pointed again to Cassandra's corporate account, complete with timestamps matching the suspicious transactions. Now armed with digital footprints and Cassandra's recorded admission of forging documents, Elise was ready to unveil the truth. But how to release it so that Richard, the donors, and the public would finally understand? If Elise went to the press too hastily, Cassandra might spin the story in her favor, claiming that Elise doctored the tapes. Elise needed an impeccable platform, perhaps a public forum tied to an official investigation. That opportunity arrived sooner than expected. The city's Attorney General had launched a preliminary inquiry into the scandal after multiple donors filed complaints about the non-profit's finances. Elise received a summons to provide testimony under oath. That same day, Catherine discovered that Cassandra, too, had been called in, presumably as a witness, from Winston Baines. Elise prepared meticulously. On the day of the hearing, she walked into the ornate courthouse building with Catherine by her side. Clutching a folder of evidence, Elise felt her heart pounding but refused to be intimidated. Richard was there as well, accompanied by his legal team. He stood in the hallway, looking torn and exhausted. Elise gave him a curt nod, not sure whether to feel anger or sadness. He attempted a small, regretful smile, but she turned away, focusing on her mission. Inside the hearing room, Cassandra wore a tailored navy suit and carried herself with feigned confidence. The questioning began with the donors, who expressed confusion about the missing funds. Then came Elise's turn. She calmly produced copies of the server logs and forensic analyses. She then handed over the audio recording, explaining how Cassandra had boasted about forging documents and expecting a payoff. Cassandra's face turned ashen. She tried to interject, accusing Elise of manufacturing evidence, but the IT specialists Elise had hired were present, verifying that the data trails pointed unequivocally to Cassandra's workstation, user account, and timestamps. The hush that fell over the courtroom was deafening as each piece of evidence dismantled Cassandra's lies. By the end of Elise's testimony, the panel of investigators looked incredulous that Cassandra had believed she could orchestrate such a scheme undetected. And as Cassandra fumbled through her own testimony, the weight of Elise's evidence left her cornered. She glared at Elise with undisguised hatred, her cunning facade shattered. Meanwhile, in the back of the room, Richard sank into his seat, head bowed, as he realized just how badly he had misjudged the woman he once cherished, and how catastrophically he had betrayed the one who truly loved him. In the days that followed the hearing, headlines blazed with the scandal's dramatic reversal. Cassandra Wilkinson exposed, fabricated evidence to frame philanthropist Elise Carnegie. Public sentiment swiftly shifted from vilifying Elise to rallying behind her. Donors who had withdrawn their pledges began reinstating them. The board of Elise's non-profit lifted her suspension, issuing a public apology for their premature judgment. Cassandra faced immediate termination from Winston Baines. The firm distanced itself, claiming they had no knowledge of her illicit activities and that Cassandra had acted alone. Legal consequences loomed. The Attorney General's office launched a deeper probe into Cassandra's past to see if she'd executed similar schemes before. Rumors surfaced that she had attempted something akin to blackmail in her previous roles, though those cases never reached public light. Amid this storm, Richard faced a reckoning of his own. His empire, Carnegie Holdings, took a reputational hit for turning its back on Elise so readily. Some high-profile clients questioned Richard's character, wondering if a leader so quick to doubt his spouse could be trusted with their assets. Although he tried to issue statements praising Elise's perseverance, the sincerity rang hollow after weeks of him allowing her name to be dragged through the mud. For Elise, public vindication felt like a double-edged sword. She had emerged from the ordeal stronger, but the personal cost was immense. The husband she had loved, who was supposed to protect and believe in her, had instead shoved her aside to preserve his own image. Though Richard begged her for a meeting, Elise remained unresponsive. She wasn't ready to see him or to hear his explanations. She was still nursing the wound of his betrayal. Catherine encouraged Elise to move forward, focusing on the relaunch of her philanthropic initiatives. "You have your reputation back," Catherine said gently. "Don't let him weigh on you anymore." Yet, Elise couldn't entirely banish Richard from her thoughts. She replayed their happiest memories, when he proposed by the cherry blossoms, when they laughed over cheap pizza in their first apartment, when his eyes shone with pride watching her speak at charity galas. She wondered if all that had been an illusion. But heartbreak doesn't vanish overnight, even with the truth on your side. As the city buzzed with speculation about Cassandra's impending charges, Elise quietly packed her boxes in the small Chelsea studio. She had found a new place, a modest but comfortable two-bedroom condo in Brooklyn, courtesy of a friend's sublet arrangement. Despite the philanthropic community's warm welcome back, she felt it was time to start anew, on her own terms, without the shadow of wealth and betrayal overshadowing her every step. Meanwhile, Richard was left in his penthouse, grappling with regrets that grew heavier each passing day. 1 week after Cassandra's downfall, Elise sat on a bench in Prospect Park, sipping a takeaway coffee and watching the autumn leaves drift to the ground. She had come here to reflect on the next steps for her non-profit, but she couldn't help thinking about Richard. Despite everything, She missed him, missed the comforting weight of his arm around her shoulders, missed the excitement in his voice when discussing new philanthropic ideas. So when her phone vibrated and she saw Richard's name light up the screen, her heart gave a painful lurch. She stared at the phone, unsure whether to answer. After a long moment, she picked up, voice subdued. "Hello?" "Elise," he said softly. "I've been trying to reach you. Can we meet, please?" She hesitated, memories of betrayal flooding back, yet part of her yearned for closure, if not reconciliation. "Tomorrow, 2 in the afternoon. At the Wisteria Cafe near the park," she said, then hung up before he could say more. The next day, Elise arrived early at the cafe, anxiety and anticipation battling in her chest. She chose a quiet corner table, her foot tapping restlessly. Minutes later, Richard walked in. He looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, hair slightly unkempt. Gone was the polished, self-assured mogul. In his place stood a man weighed down by contrition. They exchanged awkward greetings. Richard ordered 2 chamomile teas, remembering her favorite. Elise took a slow breath, steeling herself. "Say what you need to say." He swallowed hard, gaze fixed on the table. "I'm sorry, Elise. I can't say it enough. You told me you were innocent, and instead of trusting you, I sided with the world that claimed you were guilty." Elise fought back tears. "You didn't just fail to trust me, Richard. You abandoned me at the worst possible moment. You believed I could be that vile. Do you have any idea how that felt?" He reached across the table, but she pulled her hand away. His voice trembled. "I was scared. The company was under threat. The boards demanded immediate action. I let fear and pride overshadow my love for you. I justified it as business necessity, but that was just cowardice." She studied him, anger and sorrow swirling in her eyes. "I supported you for years, Richard. I believed in your vision, but the moment I needed you to do the same, you left me to fend for myself." Richard's eyes glistened. "I know, and it kills me. I've stepped away from the board for a bit, let them handle the day-to-day. None of it matters if I lose you. If there's any chance, any at all, to fix what I broke, I want to try." Elise inhaled sharply, tears pricking her eyes. "How can I trust you again? Trust isn't something you can buy back or fix with an apology. It's earned, day by day." He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I'll do whatever it takes, for however long it takes." Silence stretched between them. Elise wasn't ready to forgive so easily. She sensed Richard's sincerity, but the wounds were deep. Even so, she didn't get up to leave. Something in her heart, battered but not broken, listened to his remorse, uncertain of the final outcome. In the weeks following their emotional cafe meeting, Elise allowed Richard small steps back into her life, tentative steps. They agreed to speak regularly, focusing on open communication rather than arguments. Elise insisted that any reconciliation would require marriage counseling, and Richard readily agreed. They began attending sessions with a renowned therapist in Manhattan, Dr. Felicia Levinson, who specialized in couples recovering from betrayal. The sessions were intense. Elise vented years of frustration about how Richard always placed business interests above personal relationships. Richard confronted his own fear of losing everything he worked for, a fear that made him sacrifice the people he loved most. Dr. Levinson guided them through trust-building exercises, honesty protocols, and mindfulness techniques to handle conflict. Parallel to therapy, Elise resumed her philanthropic leadership in earnest. The scandal had ironically boosted her visibility. Donations soared as the public championed her resilience. She also launched a new initiative dedicated to digital security awareness for nonprofits, determined to protect others from the kind of hacking and forgery that nearly destroyed her. Richard, quietly supportive, offered resources from Carnegie Holdings, though Elise insisted on partial autonomy. She wanted to stand on her own feet, not reliant on his empire. Meanwhile, Cassandra Wilkinson faced charges of fraud and defamation. Her court proceedings became a media spectacle. Elise found no satisfaction in Cassandra's downfall. She felt only relief that the truth prevailed. When asked by a reporter if she had any statement, Elise simply said, "I hope justice is done. My focus now is to serve the community and move forward with my life." That curt but dignified response garnered widespread respect. It wasn't all smooth sailing with Richard, however. Old triggers flared up. If Richard missed a counseling appointment due to business, Elise's doubts resurfaced. If Elise bristled at a minor oversight, Richard felt crushing guilt. Dr. Levinson reminded them that healing from such a profound betrayal was a marathon, not a sprint. Forgiveness, if it was truly possible, would come in stages. And yet, Richard made tangible changes. He delegated more responsibilities at Carnegie Holdings, cutting down his once obsessive 80-hour work weeks. He attended Elise's fundraisers, not just as a sponsor, but as a volunteer, helping set up chairs and greet guests. He publicly acknowledged Elise's innocence at investor meetings, praising her ethical leadership. Over time, these gestures chipped away at Elise's walls. She started to believe that perhaps the man she fell in love with was still there, emerging from beneath layers of corporate armor. By the end of the year, they looked back on the chaos that nearly tore them apart. Though the path ahead remained challenging, there was a flicker of hope guiding them forward, a shared determination to rebuild what had been shattered. Whether that flicker would grow into a steady flame, only time would tell. Spring arrived, washing New York City in fresh blossoms and a sense of renewal. Elise's non-profit, now rebranded as Beacon Horizons, prepared for a grand relaunch event to highlight new partnerships and expanded initiatives. The guest list included top philanthropists, city officials, and even celebrities passionate about social impact. It felt like the perfect moment for Elise to showcase how far she had come since the scandal. Richard volunteered to help organize the event, offering Beacon Horizons the resources of Carnegie Holdings' marketing department. Elise hesitated, but ultimately accepted. She recognized that bridging their personal gap also meant learning to collaborate professionally again, on her terms. Over the next few weeks, they worked closely, finalizing keynote speakers, sponsorship deals, and media coverage. One afternoon, while sifting through old files to gather success stories for the relaunch, Elise stumbled across pictures from her wedding. She paused, her heart twisting. There she was, smiling in her white gown, and there was Richard, eyes brimming with adoration as they exchanged vows. The photos stirred a swirl of emotions, regret for what had been lost, gratitude for the love they once shared, and uncertain hope for what might still be salvaged. That evening, she showed the wedding photos to Richard in a quiet moment, away from the hustle of event planning. He stared at them, overcome with remorse. "I remember how I felt that day," he whispered, "like I'd won the lottery just having you in my life. I let my fear overshadow that." Elise squeezed his hand gently. "We were happy once. Maybe we can be again. But we can't pretend the hurt isn't there. We have to confront it, grieve it, and decide if we can grow beyond it." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I'm willing to face it all, Elise, as long as you're beside me." In the following therapy session, they tackled the wedding photos, discussing how illusions of perfection sometimes mask underlying insecurities. Dr. Levinson encouraged them to shape new memories together, ones rooted in honesty rather than unspoken expectations. She suggested they renew their vows eventually, not immediately, but as a symbolic gesture when they both felt ready to fully commit again. The idea intrigued Elise. Could they truly start over? Could the man who once abandoned her in a crisis now become the partner she needed? She prayed for clarity. Despite her reservations, she realized she still loved Richard. But love alone might not be enough if trust couldn't be rebuilt. With the relaunch event looming, they focused on the immediate task, celebrating Beacon Horizons' future. Elise wanted the night to exemplify resilience and unity. If, by the event's conclusion, she and Richard found themselves moving toward a real reconciliation, it would be a testament that even after the worst betrayals, love might still find a way to endure. The Beacon Horizons relaunch took place at a sleek, modern venue along the Hudson River. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the shimmering water, while elegant floral arrangements and tastefully lit displays reflected Elise's refined aesthetic. Guests in formal attire mingled, sipping champagne and nibbling on gourmet canapes. Soft piano music drifted through the space, setting a hopeful, celebratory mood. Elise, wearing a simple yet striking midnight blue gown, greeted attendees with a gracious smile. She felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Catherine O'Neill, who had been at her side throughout the ordeal, was also present, beaming with pride. The event marked a triumph over adversity, and many approached Elise to congratulate her on surviving the malicious attempt to discredit her. Richard arrived promptly, dressed in a tailored black suit. Though he still exuded the polished confidence of a millionaire financier, his demeanor was softer, humbler than the old Richard, who once prioritized business over everything else. He approached Elise gently, offering to stand by her side as she introduced Beacon Horizons' mission to the crowd. The speeches began. A city council representative praised Elise's dedication to underserved communities. A well-known actress spoke about the non-profit's future scholarship programs. Finally, Elise took the stage. She looked out over the crowd, some faces familiar, some new supporters, and drew a breath. Beacon Horizons is not just a name, she began. It's a promise that even in the darkest moments, we can strive toward a better future. Many of you know the challenges we faced in the past year, how we nearly collapsed under false accusations. But thanks to the unwavering support of true friends and the resilience of our team, we stand here today, stronger than ever. A wave of applause erupted. Elise glanced at Richard, who watched intently from the front row, his gaze filled with admiration. She spoke further about new programs, her gratitude for second chances, and the belief that honesty and compassion always triumph over deceit. By the time she concluded, many in the room were on their feet, applauding her courage. As the evening wound down, Richard quietly took Elise aside, leading her to a secluded outdoor terrace overlooking the river. The city lights twinkled in the distance. He cleared his throat, his tone gentle. "Elise, I know tonight is about celebrating your work, but I need to say something important." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elise's heart fluttered. Opening it, he revealed a ring, distinct from her original wedding band, featuring a serene sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "This is a vow renewal ring," he explained, voice trembling. "I don't expect you to wear it right away or even accept it tonight, but I want you to know I'm serious about rebuilding our life together. If you'll let me, I want to prove every day that I choose you over my fears." Tears welled in Elise's eyes. She touched the ring softly, feeling the sincerity in his words. For a moment, the glimmering city lights, the gentle breeze, and the hush of the night all converged into a single hush. Then, mustering her courage, Elise leaned in and whispered, "I'm not ready yet, but I'm closer than I was yesterday." She kissed him softly on the cheek, stepping back with a trembling smile. Richard's eyes shone with a mixture of hope and gratitude. As they returned to the party, arm in arm, neither knew exactly what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, they walked forward together, determined to face whatever came next. In the quiet hush of early morning, love dared to rise again, proving that even shattered bonds can find a way to mend. Sometimes the harshest storms reveal what matters most. For Elise, a calculated scheme nearly ruined her career, her reputation, and her marriage. Yet she refused to be crushed under false accusations. Instead, she found the strength to uncover the truth, reclaim her dignity, and gradually allow a second chance at love. For Richard, losing Elise's trust was a wake-up call that no empire, no fortune could fill the void she once occupied. His path to redemption involved not only exposing the lies spun by Cassandra, but also confronting his own insecurities and learning to put faith in the woman he cherished.
He was the dashing mogul every ambitious entrepreneur wanted to emulate. She was the poised, loyal wife who had stood by him from humble beginnings. No one would have guessed that behind the gated mansion's manicured lawns, betrayal festered like poison. Until one day, in a flurry of financial sabotage, he let his mistress cut off his wife's credit cards. It was humiliating, scandalous, and only the beginning of a whirlwind that would pit powerful business alliances against each other. In a boardroom confrontation that stunned everyone, the CEO himself stepped in, but not in the way anyone expected. Buckle up. This is the story of love, greed, and revenge. Jordan Alberts was not born into luxury. He grew up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Milwaukee, where he learned to hustle by selling candy bars door to door at the age of 10. Over the years, Jordan's unwavering determination and charm propelled him into better circles. First at a local startup, then into his own tech company that caught the eye of an angel investor. By the time he was 35, Jordan was a self-made millionaire, a prominent figure on various entrepreneurial boards, and had connections with people like Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, and a few top executives at Google. His wife, Elizabeth Alberts née Wagner, had been with him through everything. They met in college at a small tech entrepreneur club meeting, both bright-eyed and dreaming of changing the world. Elizabeth came from a modest background, too. Her father was a retired auto mechanic, and her mother a homemaker. She'd studied communications with an emphasis on public relations, and it was through Elizabeth's network of contacts that Jordan first gained access to small local pitch events. While Jordan pitched his innovative software for automating small business tasks, Elizabeth made calls, arranged coffee meetups, and tried to capture the interest of potential backers. They married in a little chapel by Lake Michigan. It wasn't a lavish wedding, no star-studded guest list, no fancy reception at the Ritz. But to Jordan and Elizabeth, it felt perfect. A union built on genuine love, unwavering support, and a shared dream of building a life and a business empire together. Over the next decade, they grew from a modest condominium in Milwaukee to a stunning estate in Austin near Lake Travis, with a sweeping view of the water and rolling Texas hills. It was there at a philanthropic event organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that Jordan's name landed on the radar of top-level investors. His company's smart automation technology was recognized for its potential to transform not just small businesses, but large-scale manufacturing and logistics. Soon after, Jordan's net worth skyrocketed from a mere $5 million to well over $200 million. For a while, everything was picture perfect. The marriage was strong, their personal synergy unwavering. Elizabeth handled some philanthropic duties, organizing events, acting as a goodwill ambassador for Jordan's brand, and forging new partnerships through her PR background. Their household staff adored them, describing Elizabeth as kind, gracious, and always mindful of the people around her. But money can be a seductive force, and success can open doors to darker temptations. Jordan began attending more exclusive networking events in Beverly Hills, New York, and beyond. Elizabeth was often at his side, but there were times she couldn't attend. Perhaps she was busy finalizing the details for a charity gala, or maybe she was simply burnt out from the unrelenting schedule. It was during these times, rare at first, then increasingly common, that Jordan got close to someone else. Her name was Ava Monroe. She was a rising star in the world of technology law, representing high-profile clients like Tesla, Amazon, and a few top-tier cryptocurrency exchanges. She had a reputation for being ruthless in negotiations, seductive in social gatherings, and unbelievably charming behind closed doors. The rumor mill started buzzing the moment Ava was seen at Jordan's table during a private dinner after a tech summit in Las Vegas. Elizabeth wasn't there. She had chosen to stay in Austin, meeting with a team of female entrepreneurs Jordan was mentoring. A few people whispered about Jordan's visible fascination with Ava, the way he leaned in whenever she spoke, how they clinked champagne flutes with an intimacy that suggested more than just business talk. No one knew for certain how fast or how deep it went, but soon the signs became undeniable. Lavish gifts appeared on Ava's social media, including a diamond bracelet, suspiciously similar to the ones Jordan's company had once gifted important clients. Photos emerged of Jordan and Ava at high-end restaurants in Manhattan, always carefully angled to obscure Jordan's face, though keen observers could still identify him by the sliver of a recognizable watch or the faint reflection in a mirrored wall. By the time the rumors reached Elizabeth, they were no longer rumors, but near-confirmed facts. She felt her chest tighten, her world spinning out of control. This couldn't be real. Jordan had always been a loyal partner. But the evidence was too compelling to deny. She confronted him in the privacy of their Lakeview mansion. At first, Jordan denied everything. Yet denial quickly turned into a half-hearted admission once Elizabeth presented him with photographic evidence, like a skilled negotiator used to controlling deals. Jordan tried to manipulate the situation, insisting that Ava was just a business associate, someone he occasionally had dinner with. But Elizabeth saw right through it. She had always been adept at reading him. A chill settled over their once loving home. Elizabeth, determined to preserve her dignity, demanded they enter marriage counseling, or at the very least step away from high-profile events until they resolved their issues in private. Jordan nodded, providing non-committal answers. He had never liked therapy, never seen the point in discussing feelings with a stranger. He agreed to her wishes on the surface, yet beneath the facade, he continued his involvement with Ava, allowing the illicit relationship to take root. This was the calm before the storm. For soon Elizabeth's sense of betrayal would pale in comparison to the massive financial and emotional blow about to come her way. Weeks passed. Elizabeth tried to focus on her philanthropic work and personal projects, attempting to distract herself from the growing chasm between her and Jordan. When a local charity she sponsored invited her to discuss future donations, Elizabeth discovered something shocking. Her personal credit card was declined. Embarrassment washed over her in front of the unsuspecting staff. She tried another card. Sure, it must have been a glitch, but that too was declined. The staff politely suggested she call her bank, and Elizabeth excused herself with a polite smile, her hands trembling as she left the office. Elizabeth called the bank suspecting fraud or an administrative error. But the bank's representative informed her that both cards had been cancelled the previous week. Under their joint account, they were tied to Jordan's finances, and evidently Jordan had authorized the cancellation. It felt like a punch to the gut. Why on earth would Jordan cancel her cards without her knowledge or consent? They had never had major financial disputes. Elizabeth always had access to family funds, albeit responsibly. She dialed Jordan, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent him several frantic texts. No response. Later that evening, Jordan came home exuding an air of tired disinterest. Elizabeth confronted him the moment he walked through the door. Under the chandelier's glow, which reflected in her tear-filled eyes, Jordan brushed aside her questions with a dismissive wave. "I needed to consolidate our finances," he said, removing his blazer. You can use the joint checking account for a while. No big deal, no big deal. Elizabeth's frustration swelled. You cancelled my credit cards without even telling me what's going on. Are you punishing me for something? Jordan's eyes flicked away nervously, and that was when Elizabeth realized he was lying again. The next words that came from his mouth were not only shocking, but also laced with a cruelty she never imagined he was capable of. Ava suggested we revisit some of my expenses. She found that you were spending frivolously. It made sense to limit credit usage. Elizabeth's heart dropped to her stomach. Ava. That woman was now meddling in their finances. As if the affair wasn't enough, Jordan had allowed this mistress to encroach into an arena that Elizabeth believed was sacred, her own household stability. What is Ava doing reviewing my spending? Since when does your fling get to decide what is or isn't frivolous? Elizabeth spat tears, threatening to spill. Jordan made an attempt at a calming gesture, but his words only fanned the flames. She's helping me restructure. Her firm has great insights into corporate finances. This is about the business, Elizabeth. It's not personal. Not personal. Elizabeth recalled how intimately personal their marriage had always been. They built every aspect of their lives together, from small decisions about wallpaper colors to big entrepreneurial leaps that demanded everything from both of them. Now Jordan was shutting her out, consulting Ava instead. In a quavering voice, Elizabeth demanded, "Reinstate my cards. I am your wife. I have a right to our finances, and you know I've never been irresponsible with money." Jordan's face hardened with a new arrogance. "Not until we finalize our restructure," he said, referring to some nebulous plan Elizabeth knew little about. "I'll handle everything in the meantime." That moment, that cold exchange, was a harbinger of the bigger heartbreak to come. If Jordan was letting Ava control such details, what other aspects of their marriage was he willing to let her sabotage? As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth discovered one more blow after another. The monthly allowance she used to cover household expenses had been slashed without explanation. The staff, including her personal assistant, was laid off. Bills began piling up, addressed to her name, but with no means to pay them aside from groveling at Jordan's feet. Friends and family started to notice. Elizabeth tried to hide her shame. She confided in her sister Caroline, who was enraged at Jordan. "This is financial abuse," Caroline insisted. "You should speak to a lawyer." Elizabeth shuddered at the thought. She still believed they could salvage their relationship, that Jordan would snap out of whatever daze Ava had put him in. Yet a small part of her whispered that maybe Caroline was right. Then came a fateful meeting at a hotel conference suite in Los Angeles, one that Jordan had insisted Elizabeth attend. It was a gathering of major tech moguls, including Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who were rumored to be there to discuss new tech innovations in global logistics. When Elizabeth arrived, she quickly realized something was off. She saw Jordan in the lounge area, standing far too close to Ava, exchanging hushed conversations. Seeing Elizabeth from a distance, Jordan slipped away discreetly, leaving Ava behind. Elizabeth approached her husband with a forced smile. "I'm here," she said, desperate to maintain composure. "What's the plan?" Jordan gave a curt nod. "There's a closed-door session for the key players only. You'll have to wait outside." In the past, Elizabeth had always been included in these key player sessions as Jordan's partner and PR advisor. The subtle exclusion burned her pride. She swallowed her anger. "Sure, I can wait." After hours of waiting, she found Jordan and Ava laughing together near the bar. As she approached, Jordan's phone buzzed, and he stepped away. That was when Ava turned a chilling smirk on her face. "You know Jordan's a visionary," Ava said, swirling the wine in her glass. "He needs someone who can keep up with him on all levels: business, ambition, excitement." Elizabeth felt her face flush with anger. "I've been by his side for years. We built this together." Ava gave a theatrical shrug. "Maybe in the past. But times change. People evolve. I guess you were too comfortable." Elizabeth clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She was determined not to make a scene in front of such influential people. But oh, how she wanted to lash out to expose Ava for the home wrecker she was. Ava flicked her hair behind her shoulder, noticing Elizabeth's agitation. "Things will be better if you accept it," she cooed, as if offering advice to a friend. "Jordan's moved on in more ways than one. The finances are just the beginning." Elizabeth's body went cold. She realized in that moment how truly precarious her situation was. Ava was not simply a fling. She was positioning herself as a partner in Jordan's professional and personal life. The credit cards were just one step in what looked like a systematic campaign to push Elizabeth out of everything she and Jordan had built. Still, Elizabeth refused to crumble. She left the event quietly, but her mind churned with rage and heartbreak. It was time for her to take action. She needed to protect herself, her assets, and her dignity. Little did she know that as she plotted her next move, Jordan and Ava were preparing a financial ambush that would push her to the brink. Only fate and an unexpected intervention by a certain CEO would alter the course of their twisted game. In the days after the Los Angeles conference, Elizabeth attempted to consult with attorneys. She picked up a referral from a friend who once worked with a high-profile divorce lawyer in New York. The initial phone calls were sobering, with Jordan's empire being primarily under his name and her credit cards cancelled. She had limited liquidity to hire top-tier representation. Even so, Elizabeth pressed forward. She managed to scrape together some funds from a personal savings account. Jordan had no access to money she had set aside from her early PR consulting days. It wasn't a large sum, but enough to secure a preliminary consultation. During that consultation, her lawyer, Michelle Liu, a bright and empathetic but hard-hitting attorney based in Houston, laid out the hard truth. Financial abuse and infidelity are serious grounds for divorce, Michelle said, scanning through Elizabeth's financial statements. But if Jordan's funneling money and assets into new accounts under his own name, or shifting resources to places you can't see, we need proof, and we need it fast. Elizabeth swallowed. She recounted Ava's involvement, how she was effectively orchestrating the restructuring. Michelle's pen scribbled quickly over a notepad. "You have a right to half of the marital assets, Elizabeth, but it looks like your husband is 2 steps ahead. We must move quickly." The plan was to gather evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing and file a court order to freeze marital assets, ensuring Elizabeth had a fair shot. But as they began drafting documents and rummaging through what records, Elizabeth had an avalanche of shocking details surfaced. Jordan wasn't merely cancelling credit cards. He was transferring stocks from their joint portfolio into an account under his newly formed trust. He had changed the authorized signatory details for a few of their properties, effectively locking Elizabeth out. He was also taking out lines of credit against certain properties, presumably to fund new ventures that, as Elizabeth suspected, involved Ava. The emotional strain weighed heavily on Elizabeth. She couldn't sleep, her appetite waned. Each day felt like standing at the center of a storm. Yet if she thought this was the worst of it, she was mistaken. One evening, after finalizing some documents with Michelle, Elizabeth returned to her mansion to find her keycard didn't work on the electronic locks. Pounding on the door, she shouted for the live-in staff if any were left. Seconds later, the door opened slightly, revealing Ava's face. "Jordan's not here," Ava said icily. "You should call next time." Elizabeth's heart hammered. "This is my home. Get out of my way," she demanded, trying to push past. But Ava slid in front of her, refusing to budge. "He told me you're not welcome here anymore until the legal mess is settled." Ava sneered. "I have every right to ask you to leave." Elizabeth was trembling with fury. "You have no rights here. You're the mistress, not the wife." With a cold laugh, Ava stepped aside and pointed at Elizabeth's luggage haphazardly placed in the foyer. "Jordan left these for you," she said. "He said to pack whatever else you need and let security escort you out if you refuse to leave." Elizabeth blinked away tears, her throat raw with outrage. She was being thrown out of her own home by the woman who had intruded into her marriage. That moment was a cruel epiphany. Jordan had not only cut off her finances, but now he was physically pushing her out of the place she had shared with him for years. Yet in all that darkness, a sliver of light emerged the next morning. Elizabeth received a phone call from a close mutual friend, Marcus O'Donnell, who worked with Jordan at a large tech conglomerate in Dallas. Marcus was someone Elizabeth trusted, an executive who had known Jordan since the early days. He had seen them build the company from the ground up. Elizabeth Marcus said, his tone urgent. "I don't know everything that's going on, but I heard from your staff that you've been locked out. There's a board meeting next week. Jordan wants to finalize some big decisions. If you can get to that meeting and talk to the chairman, maybe you can find some leverage." Elizabeth's breath caught in her chest. The chairman of this particular conglomerate was none other than famed CEO David Hartridge, known not just for his visionary leadership, but also for a strict code of ethics. Over the years, Hartridge had invested heavily in Jordan's business. He was the reason Jordan sat on that board. "He's not the type to meddle in personal affairs," Marcus warned. "But if Jordan's pulling stunts that compromise your share in the company, Hartridge might step in. He's big on fairness and hates scandal." It was the glimmer of hope Elizabeth needed. She thanked Marcus profusely. The plan was simple: attend the board meeting, confront Jordan in front of Hartridge, and present enough evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing to ensure the board and possibly the entire conglomerate would not stand for it. She spent the week gathering documents, bank statements, and text message screenshots that implicated Jordan in unscrupulous financial moves. Michelle Liu helped compile everything into a neat folder. "You need to be prepared for Jordan to lash out," Michelle warned. "He'll try to discredit you in front of the board." Elizabeth nodded her determination, overshadowing her fear. She practiced her speech, reciting it in the mirror of her modest hotel room, where she had temporarily moved. Heart pounding, she told herself that if there was ever a time to fight, it was now. Finally, the day of the board meeting arrived. Elizabeth dressed in a sleek black pantsuit that radiated confidence. She walked into the corporate skyscraper in downtown Dallas, her chin held high despite the knot in her stomach. She spotted Jordan in the corridor, flanked by Ava, and a couple of the board members. As soon as he saw Elizabeth, his expression darkened. "You're not supposed to be here," Jordan said, trying to keep his voice low. Elizabeth raised her chin. "I'm still an investor in your company. I hold shares. So yes, I'm attending the board meeting." Ava stepped in with a condescending smile. "Don't make a scene, Elizabeth. This meeting is for serious stakeholders." "I am a serious stakeholder," Elizabeth retorted, voice steady. I'm your wife, still legally, and I'm half of this empire's foundation. Behind them, a tall figure approached CEO David Hartridge himself, a man in his 50s with greying temples and a firm handshake. He regarded Elizabeth with polite curiosity. Ms. Alberts, I presume? Elizabeth nodded, handing over her invitation papers and a letter from her attorney, which stated that she possessed partial shares. Hartridge studied the documents, then gave a curt nod indicating she was allowed to attend. Jordan shot Elizabeth a glare that spoke volumes. You have no idea what you're getting into. But Elizabeth did. She was here to preserve her dignity, her livelihood, and the legacy she had helped build. The meeting commenced in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline. The board members sat around a large mahogany table exchanging pleasantries about the upcoming quarter's projections. Jordan made a short presentation on a new partnership with a logistics firm, highlighting expansions and new contracts. A few board members clapped. Then came time for open discussion. Elizabeth raised her hand, clearing her throat. I'd like to address some concerns about the financial structuring Jordan is proposing. She began, her voice reverberating across the silent room. Jordan's face reddened. Ava, seated beside him, tried to intervene. We should keep personal matters out of board discussions, she said. But Elizabeth pressed on, raising the folder of evidence. These changes aren't just personal, Elizabeth said. They could affect company stability. Jordan is funneling resources into a new trust making questionable decisions without transparency. I have documents signed by him with references to Ms. Ava Monroe demonstrating a conflict of interest that could potentially compromise investor trust. A hush fell over the room. Hartridge's brow creased. Jordan, is this true? Jordan stood, scrambling for composure. This is a personal matter. Elizabeth is overstepping her bounds. She's not. Hartridge replied, his voice sharp. If there's a conflict of interest that threatens the stability of our partnership, it's very much a board matter. Jordan's eyes darted between Hartridge and Elizabeth. For the first time, he seemed cornered, uncertain how to proceed. Ava shot Elizabeth a lethal glare, realizing that Elizabeth's boldness had forced the topic into official territory. The tension was palpable. Elizabeth's heart thumped so loudly, she was certain everyone could hear it. But she stood her ground. Continuing. I also discovered lines of credit being taken against marital properties to fund expansions. These expansions could be legitimate, but the details are obscured. I have reason to believe Ms. Monroe is manipulating these finances for her personal gain. Murmurs rippled through the board. A couple members exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who might have sided with Jordan seemed rattled by the magnitude of Elizabeth's accusations. Hartridge steepled his fingers, evaluating the situation. I propose we recess for 15 minutes. Jordan, Elizabeth, Miss Monroe, please step into my office. Jordan inhaled frustration etched across his features, but he couldn't refuse the CEO's request, not without causing a catastrophic scene. The three followed Hartridge into a glass-walled corner office, shutting the door behind them. In that tense, enclosed space, the real battle began. Elizabeth laid out her evidence on the polished table before Hartridge. Jordan tried to dismiss it all as a personal dispute, but Hartridge was no fool. He could see the potential for scandal, especially if a partner was using company infrastructure for personal vendettas. Throughout this heated exchange, Ava attempted to deflect blame. She portrayed herself as a legal advisor, merely suggesting financial moves, disclaiming any wrongdoing. But Elizabeth's carefully compiled documents suggested otherwise. Emails, text messages, and proposed legal documents bore Ava's digital fingerprints. Hartridge's expression darkened. "Jordan, this is unacceptable. If these documents are authentic, you've put your personal entanglements ahead of corporate responsibility. I won't allow it under my leadership." Jordan's face went pale. He tried to protest to label Elizabeth's claims as overblown, but Hartridge had already made up his mind. "Until this is sorted out, Jordan, I'm placing your proposals on hold. We can't move forward with any major financial changes if they're under this sort of ethical cloud." Elizabeth felt a surge of relief, a faint vindication. While she hadn't resolved the core issue of Jordan's betrayal, at least the board wasn't letting him run roughshod over her financial future. But Jordan, cornered and embarrassed, lashed out in desperation. "You can't shut me down like this," he snapped at Hartridge, voice tight with anger. "I'm the one who made that original deal with your conglomerate. You need my innovation." Hartridge stood up, bristling at Jordan's tone. "I'm the CEO, and you've just made me question your reliability and integrity. Watch yourself, Jordan." Ava stepped closer to Jordan, placing a hand on his arm to calm him, but he shrugged her off. "You'll regret this," he warned Hartridge, then turned to Elizabeth. "And you made a fool of me in front of everyone." Elizabeth clenched her fists, refusing to cower. "You did that to yourself," she said, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. Jordan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ava followed quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Hartridge sighed, looking at Elizabeth, who was holding back tears. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Hartridge said. "I'm sorry about your personal struggles, but I have to protect the board's interests. If you need anything, contact my office. I'm not a family court judge, but I won't let Jordan drag the company down." With that, Elizabeth let out a shaky breath. She had achieved a small but crucial victory, yet she couldn't shake the nagging sense that Jordan, humiliated and cornered, was far from finished. She left the skyscraper, stepping out into the bright Dallas sun, uncertain, but determined. Little did she know this chapter was only the start of a far more explosive confrontation, one that would involve security teams, sudden betrayals, and a twist that would bring Jordan himself to his knees. Life outside the mansion was lonely, but Elizabeth was thankful for the reprieve from Ava's manipulations. She rented a small apartment near downtown Austin and used what funds she had left to secure her basic needs, while Michelle continued to press for a financial freeze on Jordan's assets. In the weeks following the tense board meeting, Jordan went surprisingly quiet. No more legal letters arrived. No more credit lines were sabotaged. He didn't attempt to contact Elizabeth, nor did Ava. Instead, it seemed as though they had retreated into some silent fortress, likely strategizing their next move. Elizabeth took advantage of the lull. She reconnected with old friends and mentors, explaining partially at least what she was going through. While many were shocked, they offered support in the form of references, moral encouragement, and occasional leads for a stable job or a business partnership. Despite the heartbreak, Elizabeth discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a passive bystander in Jordan's world. She had her own capabilities, her own strengths. Slowly, she started consulting for small tech firms, using her communications and PR background to help them craft compelling pitches. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work that reminded her she could stand on her own 2 feet. Then one evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. A crisp, professional voice greeted her. "Hello, Elizabeth. This is Patricia Carlson. I'm an executive assistant at Tesla, working under Elon Musk's leadership team. Elizabeth's heart thudded. She had met Patricia briefly at a tech conference in Berlin 2 years ago, but they'd never exchanged more than pleasantries. "How can I help you?" Elizabeth asked, mind racing. Patricia hesitated. "I might have information relevant to your predicament with Jordan. Let's just say some of our legal divisions have been observing Ava Monroe for a while, and some red flags have come up." Red flags. Elizabeth's curiosity flared. "You're investigating her?" A slow exhale from the other end. "Our major concern is that she's potentially engaged in insider trading, or at least something that veers close to it. She's been known to manipulate powerful men to gain inside info on deals, especially around new technologies. We don't have direct evidence, but we do know that she's heavily involved in your husband's finances. We suspect she might be siphoning resources for her own agendas." Elizabeth's mind reeled. This was bigger than a domestic spat. Ava might be leveraging Jordan's resources and connections to stake her own claims in the tech world. That explained the sudden shifts in finances, the new trust accounts, and the lines of credit. Patricia continued. "We want to bring her down, but we need more information. You, Elizabeth, might be in a unique position to gather that." Elizabeth tapped her fingers on the kitchen counter. "Isn't that something your legal team handles?" A rueful laugh. "Yes, but we need Jordan's direct involvement. We suspect he's unwittingly giving her access to confidential materials through corporate crossovers or joint ventures. If you can help us prove it, we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, protect Tesla's proprietary data, and help you gain leverage in your divorce." Elizabeth considered the offer. It was risky. If Ava was truly up to something illegal, Elizabeth could expose herself to potential backlash, but the lure of finally getting the upper hand was strong. "I'll do what I can," Elizabeth replied cautiously. "But how do I communicate with you about this?" Patricia gave her a secure email address and instructions on how to encrypt files. "And one more thing," Patricia said, before hanging up. "People like Ava are cunning. She'll anticipate your every move. Don't trust phone lines or any device that Jordan has access to. Be careful." Elizabeth thanked her and ended the call. Adrenaline coursing through her. For the next few days, she scoured her digital archives for anything that might hint at insider information. Jordan's old emails messages about collaborations with major tech companies like Tesla or Amazon, documents that Ava might have manipulated anything that showed a trail of questionable activity. She found a few suspicious threads, forwarded emails from Jordan's corporate account that were CC'd to Ava's personal address. Attachments relating to Tesla's Project Next Gen battery were among them, though none of this was strictly proof of wrongdoing yet. Elizabeth compiled what she could and sent them to the secure email Patricia provided. In response, Patricia confirmed that these were valuable leads, but incomplete. "Keep digging," she urged, "and let me know if you get direct evidence of deals or monetary gains tied to these inside details." Meanwhile, Michelle Elizabeth's lawyer was preparing for a preliminary hearing to freeze some of Jordan's assets. She insisted Elizabeth come to court to testify about the financial abuse and the suspicious activities they had uncovered. But Jordan's side surprised them by agreeing to a partial freeze without argument. "That's strange," Michelle said, tapping a pen against the conference table. "Why would he agree so easily?" Elizabeth shrugged, perplexed. "Maybe he realizes fighting me will look bad in front of the board." But Michelle wasn't convinced. "I suspect he's preparing a bigger move. Be vigilant. He may have more leverage than we know." The next morning, Elizabeth received an unsolicited text from Jordan. "We need to talk, face to face." She felt a swirl of conflicting emotions: anger, sorrow, curiosity. But she knew she had to tread carefully. She agreed to meet him in a public place, a cafe near the courthouse, where she could keep the upper hand. When Jordan arrived, he looked tired, as though the weight of his troubles had worn him down. He offered a half-smile, which Elizabeth did not return. "Liz," he began using the old nickname he once uttered, with affection. Things got out of hand. She crossed her arms. "You think—" He sighed, scanning her face for warmth that was no longer there. "I want to settle this amicably. We can discuss spousal support, property divisions, everything. No need for a long, nasty court battle." Elizabeth let the silence hover. She wasn't naive enough to believe him at face value. "Amicably? Are you telling me Ava is out of the picture?" Jordan's shoulders tensed. "This is about you and me, not her. Look, maybe I got carried away with Ava's advice. She's a brilliant attorney." "She's manipulative," Elizabeth cut in sharply. He brushed the point aside. "Regardless, I'm willing to compromise, but I need you to lay off this insider trading nonsense. It's reckless. You're endangering my reputation." Elizabeth realized then that Jordan knew she'd been snooping into his communications. Perhaps Tesla's legal inquiries had begun reverberating in his circle. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was worried, if not about losing her, then about losing his empire. "You made me the enemy," Elizabeth replied, in a hushed, trembling tone. "When you let your mistress cut off my cards and throw me out of my home." Jordan looked away, shame flickering on his face. "I didn't handle that well. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under with these deals." She waited, letting him squirm. Then he continued. "You'll get a fair share. I promise. I just need you to stop meddling in my professional affairs, especially with Tesla or any other major collaborators. You'll ruin me if you do." A bitter laugh escaped Elizabeth. She thought of all the times she had stood beside him, protecting him, representing him before powerful players, forging alliances that were crucial to his success. Now he was pleading for her, not to ruin him. The irony nearly choked her. Before she could respond, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and muttered a soft curse. "I have to go," he said, throwing some cash on the table for their untouched coffees. Elizabeth watched him leave, a mixture of pity and disdain swirling in her stomach. It was obvious he was desperate, but was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or a ploy to keep her from uncovering more incriminating information about Ava? That question lingered as she returned to her apartment, drained. However, a new email from Patricia waited in her inbox. It contained an attachment, a partial timeline of suspicious trades linked to accounts rumored to be controlled by Ava Monroe. There were large bets placed on Tesla's stock ahead of public announcements. Gains in the tens of millions. This is huge, Elizabeth thought. If she connected these trades to emails or calls between Jordan and Ava, it could be the smoking gun. And while Elizabeth had no intention of going to the feds on her own, Tesla's legal team could bury Ava, and by extension, Jordan's complicity, if he was involved. Elizabeth clutched her phone, anxiety coursing through her. She was walking a razor's edge. One false step, and Jordan might retaliate more fiercely, or Ava might strike. But a successful strike against Ava could free Elizabeth from this entire ordeal, giving her the leverage to secure a fair divorce settlement, or even land Jordan in deeper trouble, depending on his role. She reached for her phone to text Patricia when it buzzed in her hand. A call from an unknown number again. Tentatively, Elizabeth answered. A man's voice greeted her calm and steady. "Hello, Ms. Alberts. My name is Gregory Shaw. I'm part of CEO David Hartridge's legal counsel. He asked me to follow up regarding the situation with your husband." Elizabeth's heart skipped. Hartridge's legal counsel. "We understand from Mr. Hartridge's conversation with you that there might be unethical or even illegal behavior in play," Gregory continued. "The board is concerned about potential liability if Jordan's personal dealings spill into our corporate structure. We can't risk another scandal. Mr. Hartridge would like to assist you discreetly." Elizabeth exhaled slowly. She was on the cusp of powerful alliances forming against Jordan and Ava, but the more people got involved, the more dangerous it felt. Gregory concluded, "We'll be in touch with your lawyer. If you have any crucial evidence, Mr. Hartridge suggests you keep it secure. He wants to avoid a public meltdown, but he's prepared to do what's necessary to protect the company's interests, and that includes supporting you in your legal disputes, if it comes to that." Hanging up. Elizabeth felt a measure of validation. The cracks in Jordan's seemingly untouchable world were growing. Perhaps justice would prevail. Yet as she prepared to finalize the next round of documents for Michelle, a gnawing worry kept her awake at night. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, and Jordan, though once gentle and loving, had shown he could be ruthless when threatened. She braced herself for the storm that was surely coming. The next time Elizabeth saw Jordan in person, it wasn't by chance or a carefully arranged meeting. It was at the headquarters of Hartridge's conglomerate in Dallas. A sudden emergency board session had been called to address urgent corporate matters, and Elizabeth, having been notified by Gregory Shaw, arrived prepared. She walked into the reception area, her heart pounding with anticipation. Michelle Liu had insisted on accompanying her, but at the last minute she was called to handle a crucial filing. Elizabeth went alone, relying on the moral support from Gregory and the knowledge that Hartridge wanted the truth on record. Jordan was already inside the boardroom with Ava, who paced like a clad tiger. When Elizabeth entered, they both snapped their heads in her direction. Ava's glare could have sliced glass. Jordan's face was inscrutable, tense, angry, but also tinged with fear. Hartridge arrived moments later, trailed by a few board members and legal advisors. He wasted no time in stating the purpose of the meeting. "Allegations have come to my attention that Ms. Monroe has been engaging in stock trades leveraging proprietary information from Jordan's company and potentially from our own collaborations. We need to clarify the truth. Now." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Ava's jaw clenched. "This is preposterous," she began. "We demand to see your proof." Hartridge nodded to one of his advisors, who distributed printed documents, timelines of suspicious trades, tied to accounts flagged by Tesla's legal team, along with correspondences that Elizabeth and Patricia had pieced together. Jordan snatched a packet from the advisor. His eyes swept over the page's color, draining from his face. Ava's lips thinned, and for a moment Elizabeth could see the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. Hartridge pinned them with a stern gaze. "Jordan, you've been a valuable partner. I don't want to see your personal life derail your professional standing, but this is bigger than your marriage. Insider trading is a federal crime, and if Ms. Monroe is using your business resources to pull this off, you're implicated." Ava recovered quickly. She placed a hand on Jordan's arm, her voice smooth. "This is a misunderstanding, David. Anyone can align stock trades with corporate announcements. It's called speculation. Elizabeth decided enough was enough. She stood. Speculation is one thing, but forwarding private emails, entire business proposals, and preliminary press releases is not speculation. I've seen the messages. You're literally discussing the best times to execute trades based on announcements that hadn't been made public yet. Ava whirled on Elizabeth. You have no legal standing to claim that. You're just a scorned wife trying to sabotage Jordan and me. Elizabeth's blood boiled. We'll let the evidence speak. There are even time-stamped emails from Jordan's corporate account sent to your personal email, Ms. Monroe, discussing upcoming expansions and product launches. Then trades were executed in your name or trusts linked to you within hours. A hush followed. Jordan's hands shook slightly. He seemed torn between denial and guilt. After all, the evidence was damning. If he denied it outright, he'd appear foolish. But if he admitted his involvement, he risked criminal charges and the wrath of the board. Hartridge leaned forward, his voice firm. Jordan, I need answers. Were you aware of these trades? Jordan stared at the table, words refusing to form. Finally, he managed, Ava said it was all above board, that it was just normal investing. Ava let out a short laugh, but it sounded hollow. If you want to scapegoat me, Jordan, think carefully, she warned. We made certain deals in your name as well. Your signatures are on plenty of documents. The entire boardroom seemed to hold its breath. Hartridge addressed one of his legal advisors. Have we sent this to the SEC? Not yet, the advisor responded. We wanted to confront them first. Jordan shot to his feet, panic etched on his face. No need to escalate it. We can handle this internally. If I undo the trades, repay any gains, repay tens of millions of dollars, Hartridge asked. And that would just be the tip of the iceberg if the SEC digs deeper. This is out of our hands if they launch a formal investigation. Elizabeth watched Jordan unravel. This was the man who had once been so composed, so unstoppable. Now he was cornered, sweat beading on his forehead. Ava, too, looked like a wild animal backed into a corner, eyes darting around the room. At that moment, a building security guard appeared at the door, knocking softly. Mr. Hartridge, you asked for security on standby, he announced quietly. Thank you, Hartridge replied, his tone like steel. I believe we might need you. Ava's eyes flitted towards the door, then back to Hartridge. She adopted a pleading tone. David, you know me. I've handled legal matters for some of the biggest players in the industry. I would never do anything to jeopardize your trust. Hartridge's face remained stony. I trusted Jordan, not you. And this evidence suggests you're at the center of a major ethical breach. If you don't have a verifiable explanation for each of these trades and how you obtained insider information, I have no choice but to protect the company from liability. Suddenly, Jordan snapped. Fear twisted into anger, and he pointed a trembling finger at Elizabeth. You did this. You ruined everything because you couldn't handle that I moved on. Elizabeth steadied her breathing, preparing to reply. But Hartridge cut in calm yet firm. Don't blame her for your poor decisions. You let your personal affair become a corporate liability. Something in Jordan cracked. He lunged toward Elizabeth as if to grab her documents or her phone, an irrational move likely spurred by desperation. But he never made contact. In a blink, the security guard stepped forward and intercepted Jordan, gripping his arms. Stand down, sir, the guard said, voice authoritative. Jordan struggled, but the guard was a solid wall of muscle. Ava shrieked. Let him go. "This is a private matter." Hartridge shook his head, anger coloring his features. "You just attempted to assault someone in my boardroom. Security remove Mr. Alberts from the premises." Jordan's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't do that. I'm on the board." "Not anymore," Hartridge said grimly. "I can and I will. You're suspended pending an internal investigation. Once that concludes, we'll determine your status. Now go and take Ms. Monroe with you." A second guard stepped in, guiding Ava toward the door as she protested threatening lawsuits and defamation claims. But her words rang hollow, overshadowed by the looming specter of an SEC investigation. Elizabeth stood off to the side, stunned by how quickly it had escalated from a tension-filled meeting to an outright meltdown. As Jordan and Ava were led out, Jordan craned his neck to shout at her, "You'll pay for this, Elizabeth. Don't think you've won." But the threat carried little weight now. In that moment, Elizabeth felt the mixture of triumph and sorrow that comes with toppling a man she once loved. She hadn't wanted to see Jordan destroyed, only to protect herself and the life they had built together. But Jordan's actions and Ava's ambition had forced her hand. Hartridge dismissed the board members, soon after instructing his legal team to cooperate fully with any investigations. He turned to Elizabeth with a sympathetic frown. "I'm sorry you had to endure this, Ms. Alberts. I assure you we'll handle it lawfully. Whatever personal or marital disputes remain, I hope you find closure." Elizabeth gave him a small nod. "Thank you. I appreciate your fairness." She gathered her documents and left the skyscraper, the bright Texas sun striking her face as she stepped onto the street. The entire drama replayed in her mind. "He let his mistress cut off my cards, but the CEO called security on him." She thought a bitter yet satisfying sense of irony spreading in her chest. She wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Legal battles would continue, depositions would be taken, and the divorce was far from final. But in this pivotal moment, she had taken back her power, standing against the storm that Jordan and Ava had unleashed. And for the first time in months, Elizabeth felt a glimmer of hope that she might in the end be free from their tyranny. In the weeks that followed, word spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up on rumors of insider trading linked to a high-profile tech investor, hinting that a major name was under investigation. It didn't take long for the rumor mill to connect the dots to Jordan Alberts and his mysterious attorney-turned-partner, Ava Monroe. Elizabeth watched from the sidelines, inundated with calls and messages from acquaintances, reporters, and sometimes even old college classmates she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored most of them, preferring to let the legal process unfold without adding fuel to the media frenzy. Jordan, under immense legal and financial pressure, attempted to strike a deal if Elizabeth agreed to keep quiet and not testify against him or Ava. Regarding insider trading, he would give her a generous divorce settlement. The settlement included alimony, a hefty lump sum, and properties that would secure her financial future. However, Elizabeth refused any agreement that required her to lie or withhold the truth if subpoenaed. Nonetheless, she allowed her lawyer Michelle to work out a fair settlement that didn't involve perjury. Eventually, Jordan capitulated, realizing he had to salvage what he could from the marriage and business meltdown. The final settlement granted Elizabeth a significant portion of the assets, the mansion by Lake Travis, ironically, and a sizable share of Jordan's original tech startup. Meanwhile, Ava disappeared from the public eye, her reputation in tatters. Rumors surfaced that she'd fled the country perhaps to avoid legal repercussions, while others suggested she was hiding out in some luxury villa, waiting for the storm to pass. Either way, her days of meddling in Jordan's finances seemed to be over. Elizabeth didn't celebrate Jordan's downfall. She quietly grieved the end of a marriage that had started in love and partnership, yet she also felt relief and a renewed sense of self. She returned to the Lake Travis mansion, deciding whether to keep it or sell. The sweeping views of the water brought back memories, some of which felt like knives to her heart, others that warmed her soul. She began a new chapter in her life, leveraging her PR skills to start a consultancy focused on helping women entrepreneurs navigate both business and personal challenges. She named it Phoenix Rose Consulting, symbolizing rebirth and resilience. To her surprise, she found more joy in championing other women than she ever did, standing behind Jordan at glitzy galas. She kept in touch with Patricia from Tesla, who occasionally updated her on the ongoing investigations. Whether Jordan faced criminal charges depended on further evidence. But at least for Elizabeth, the immediate threat to her assets and well-being had lifted. David Hartridge reached out, once inviting Elizabeth to a dinner with the board, presumably to mend fences. Elizabeth politely declined. She had no desire to relive the tension of board meetings or navigate corporate politics, where her personal life became public fodder. She was grateful for Hartridge's stance, but preferred to build her future away from the chaos. In moments of solitude, Elizabeth reflected on the entire ordeal. She'd once believed that love, loyalty, and shared ambition could conquer anything. Yet she also realized that unchecked power and ego could corrode even the strongest of bonds. Jordan's betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it set her free to discover her own strengths and a life not tethered to someone else's rising star. Yes, heartbreak lingered, and healing was an ongoing process. But Elizabeth found herself waking each day with a sense of purpose. She'd gather with female founders at local co-working spaces, host workshops on media relations, and offer moral support to those feeling overshadowed by bigger players. Each time she saw a spark of confidence ignite in another woman's eyes, she felt her own sense of wholeness return. In time, Elizabeth would finalize the divorce, sign the deeds, and officially start over. A sense of calm settled within her, like the slow, tranquil waves on Lake Travis at dawn. Her story, the humiliating card cancellations, the public meltdown, the mistress's meddling, would become a cautionary tale, one she shared sparingly, only when it might help others. Despite the scars, Elizabeth refused to let bitterness define her. She chose growth empathy and a belief that with the right support, anyone can rise from the ashes more formidable than before. Just as Elizabeth thought she had reached stable ground, fate tossed her another curveball. A month after the settlement, Michelle called her urgently. "The feds want to depose you," she said. "They uncovered new evidence Jordan may be involved in deeper crimes, bribery, money laundering. Ava might have orchestrated a network." Elizabeth's stomach dropped. Jordan never mentioned anything like that. "They've found offshore transactions and documents with his signature," Michelle said grimly. 2 days later, Elizabeth sat in a stark federal office, flanked by Michelle and 2 serious agents. They questioned her about Jordan's finances, Ava's role, the card cancellations, and philanthropic events that may have masked backdoor deals. Elizabeth stuck to the facts. She neither speculated nor dramatized. One agent, impressed, said, "You've been very helpful, Ms. Alberts. This case is significant." She left emotionally drained but relieved. She hadn't been dragged down with Jordan, but the storm wasn't over. Whispers followed Jordan was hiding at a secluded ranch, dodging the press. Ava had vanished. More subpoenas were issued. An indictment loomed. Elizabeth stayed focused on her consultancy, channeling stress into helping other women navigate business pitfalls. Her story, once painful, became a symbol of warning and strength. Then came the headlines: Jordan Alberts, indicted for insider trading fraud and obstruction. Ava was named but still missing. The scandal rocked the tech world. Elizabeth issued a single statement. "I'm saddened by Jordan's choices. I've cooperated fully with authorities and continue to rebuild my life." Eventually, Jordan pled guilty to a lesser charge, offering a tearful courtroom apology. Elizabeth watched from home, tears in her eyes, not from triumph, but quiet grief for the man she once loved. Still, she understood consequences had to follow actions. That night, beneath the soft moonlight over Lake Travis, Elizabeth allowed herself one last cry for the past that died and the hope still waiting ahead. Life has a way of testing our fortitude when we least expect it. Elizabeth Alberts began this journey as a devoted wife, only to see her world upended by betrayal and financial sabotage. Yet what she lost in illusions, she gained in unbreakable resilience. Standing up to powerful forces and calling out wrongdoing isn't easy, but it's sometimes the only way to protect your dignity and your future.